Hello, I'm author K.M. Doherty, author of the Thomas Holland series. At the moment, I have two books out. The first one was Thomas Holland and the Prophecy of Elfhaven. And the second one, the new book, just came out August 1st. It's called Thomas Holland in the Realm of the Ogres. I'm going to read a segment, one of my favorite scenes from the second book. And it's actually, when I was writing the second book, I thought it'd be fun to have a dragon naming contest, because I have a major dragon that plays a part in this book, and he'll be a major part in the second book, or the third book of the trilogy. And so I wanted to come up with a fun way of doing that. So I sent out to the people that had got on my newsletter and had a dragon naming contest. I got over 100 wonderful names. Several of them were really hard to decide upon what was the best name to use there. But others were darling. Like I got some names like Chichibu and Fluffy and Red Robert. Can you imagine this huge dragon landing and shaking the ground and breathing fire, and the kids are jumping out of the way, and he says, "I, Chichibu from Mount," you know, and the kids would just crack up. It could be funny, but it would be a different book. Anyway, that's not the name I chose. So, but that scene where the dragon first lands and Kieran, where is he? There he is Avani's younger brother. He's maybe 8. She's 13, a magically gifted elven girl. She's self-confident and competent, stands up to the prince. But her little brother is pretty precocious, and he suggested in the first book to call a dragon so they could get from one place to another when they had very little time. But they just laughed at him, as they will in this book too. But I'll read the scene where he tries calling a dragon. Kieran drew his dagger, preparing to run and help his friends. But something strange was going on. All the ogres and dwarves suddenly stopped fighting. They pointed up at the sky, yelling something, but Kieran couldn't make out what they were saying. Then everyone bolted down the mountain. A warm breeze began to blow. Squinting upward against the bright sunlight, Kieran tried to see what they'd been staring at. A thunderous whoosh whoosh sounded, and the largest dragon Kieran had ever heard tale of dropped from the sky like a rock. Miniature tornadoes of snow, dirt, and small stones spiraled off its beating wingtips as it landed. The ground shook as its massive talons slashed deeply into the ice and snow. Kieran raised his hand, shielding his eyes from the flying debris. The creature's wings crackled and creaked like heavy old leather as the beast folded its wings by its side. Standing only 10 paces from Kieran, the dragon cocked its massive, armor-laden head sideways. Its huge, dark eye studied the elf lad intently. The monster flared its nostrils. Steam spewed forth, followed by a puff of smoke. Kieran's eyes began to water. Wow, it's warm! And that smell! Brimstone, onions, and grilled lizard meat. The ground shook as the beast roared, "Who dares summon a dragon?" It was me, actually. I called you. Hi, my name's Kieran. Kieran Duta of Elfhaven. Kieran took a step forward and offered his hand to the beast. The dragon reared up slightly, its eyes now wide. The beast snorted. Flames leapt out. Kieran dove to the ground, just in time. I, Nanosh, mightiest descendant of the dragons of Mount Zayden, was summoned by a scrawny elf brat. The beast once again flared its nostrils and moved its massive head until its eye hovered only inches from Kieran's face. Kieran scooted back on his bottom a couple of paces, then got up and quickly patted several singed and still smoking spots on his cape. Turning his head slightly, Kieran yelled, "Hey, guys, it worked! I called a dragon!" Kieran, still eyeing the creature sidelong, waved his hands wildly, motioning for the others to come. The dragon blinked, then slithered its monstrous serpentine neck around, looking in the direction Kieran waved. Halfway down the slope, from behind several large stones, Kieran's friends slowly stood. Glancing nervously at one another, they crept cautiously toward the giant winged beast. Ninosh's left eye scanned those before him. Finally stopping on Tom, he sniffed the air. By the way, Tom is the protagonist, if I didn't mention to some of those that hadn't read the first story. You are not of this world. Steam lazily drifted up from the monster's flaring nostrils. Tom wasn't sure if the beast was actually speaking out loud or if the words just sprang into his mind. He took a tentative step forward. Hi, my name's Tom Holland. I'm from Earth. It's kind of a complicated story. Tom quickly scanned the other faces. You see, it all started when I took my robot Chloe to the lab to meet... Stop! Boomed the beast. Its long neck slithered around, shifting its enormous head close to Tom's. Tom leaned back, swallowing hard. Max barked. Max is Tom's dog, by the way. Max barked. Tom grabbed his collar. The dragon's eye flicked to Max, then back to Tom. A boy and his beast. Thomas Holland. From the prophecy? The destroyer from another world. Ninosh stared intently at Tom. He's here to help us, said Kieran, stepping beside Tom. The winged beast shifted his gaze to Kieran. The dragon snorted. Once again, flames launched outward. Tom and Kieran both jumped sideways. Max growled. Shh, Max, whispered Tom. As if to himself, Ninosh said, The prophecy is unclear. Elves enjoy writing their prophecies as riddles. Perhaps it is no coincidence that we meet today. The creature raised its head, flexing its powerful shoulder muscles. Why did you summon me, boy from the prophecy? Boy from another world? What is it you desire? Tom didn't summon you, I did, protested Kieran. Everyone, including the dragon, ignored him. We need your help, began Tom. Nagesh stole the replacement power source that powers the Citadel. If we don't get it to Elfhaven before the barrier collapses, the city will be destroyed by Nagesh's minions of trolls and ogres. Nagesh raised its head and screamed. Flames launched high above him. The ground shook as the dragon roared, Nagesh! The beast glared at them, his eyes lit from within with a flickering red light. So that's a good place to end. So I kind of love that. In the first one, everyone laughed at Kieran when he said they could call a dragon. And they laughed again and headed down the slope here. But he proved them wrong. So that's kind of one of my favorite places. Any questions? No? Would you mind if I read... I'm going to read you one of my favorite scenes now from the first book, if nobody minds. So once again, this is Thomas Holland and the Prophecy of Elfhaven. It's actually the scene in the library where Tom gets to meet the librarian for the first time. And actually, when I write a book, I used to be an engineer. I still am, I guess. And so I'm very detail-oriented. And I had an incredibly detailed outline that was bigger than the book until I passed chapter 4 in my writing. And finally, the book got to be bigger than the outline because I kept putting stuff in the outline as I'd think about it. And I had all the scenes mapped out, but I didn't have this one. I just had a kind of generic high-level thing that said, give Tom a tour of Elfhaven. So this character, now one of my favorite of the secondary characters, the librarian, he just kind of wrote himself. And I actually added a couple more scenes with him, and he's in the second book as well. All right, so let me get to the perfect spot. Here we are. Here we go. I'm going to start here. And I already mentioned Avani and Kieran and Tom and his dog Max. They're in this particular scene. Kieran, go get St. Bernard, hissed Avani. Tom winced. Kieran ran over and grabbed Max by the collar, apologizing profusely to the man and the woman. then pulled him back over to where Tom and his sister were waiting for them. Just ahead stood the librarian's desk. As they walked over to the counter, the librarian rose up from what he was doing and greeted them. There was something odd about this fellow, though. For one thing, Tom could see right through him. In fact, the librarian appeared to be a ghost. Max barked at the spirit. Kieran hushed him. Max cocked his head and gave a weak whimper. "May I help you?" asked the apparition in a sing-songy voice, ignoring Max's outburst. Tom looked sidelong at Avani, who gave him a reassuring nod, so he took a deep breath and asked, do you have any books on magic?" The ghost stared at Tom in apparent disbelief as he absently tapped his finger on the desk. The effort, of course, made no noise. "What is this? Some sort of a joke? Do I look like the kind of spirit that could conjure up a book out of thin air?" "Well," began Tom, thinking he looked exactly like that kind of spirit, "everyone knows there haven't been any books on magic since the great library in Nalanda was burned to the ground. That was almost 100 years ago, during the War of the Wizards. Perhaps you've heard of it?" The sarcasm seemed to crackle in the air around Tom. The apparition leaned forward to within a foot of Tom. Tom leaned back. "Is it some sort of a childish prank?" In a high, whiny voice, the spirit continued, "Oh, it's Let's Pull the Ghost's Leg Day, is it? Hey, that's a good one. Pull the ghost's leg? Ha! Like to see you try it. Anyway, run along now," said the spirit, regaining his composure. "I have serious patrons to service. Shoo, run along now, I say." "He's not from around here," began Kieran, standing up for Tom. "His name's Thomas Holland. He's from another world." The ghost stopped moving, as did all the books floating about the library. In fact, the whole library fell deathly silent. "Did you say Thomas Holland?" asked the spirit in a quiet, reserved tone. "That's right," said Kieran. The books resumed floating, and people started talking in whispers. Everyone in the library was looking in Tom's direction. Everyone, except the ghost, that is. The librarian now looked down at his desk, apparently finished with them. "Sorry, I can't help you. I could try an interlibrary search if you like, but the results would be the same." "No, thanks." Tom could tell this conversation was getting nowhere. He looked at Avani, and she turned and led them all from the building. Once they'd left the library, the spectre raised his right hand. Moments later, from high up in a secret section of the library, protected by strong magic, and a sign that read, "For kings and philosophers' eyes only," must be accompanied by a ghost. A large, dusty tome floated out of its place on the shelf, then along the aisle and over the balcony, lazily drifting down 3 stories to the ground floor. It finally floated over to the librarian's desk and stopped. The book was titled The Prophecy of Elfhaven. It was handwritten by the ancient prophet Irstradamus. The librarian waved its hand across the book. A small cloud of dust drifted in all directions as it opened to a chapter entitled Thomas Holland. The ghost raised his gaze once more, his hollow eyes staring off in the direction that the children had gone. I actually told a story earlier about you that I practiced and practiced and practiced saying the second book, titled Thomas Holland in the Realm of the Ogres. And I asked you how you did, and as I remember, you said, 6, maybe 7.
Much better.
Oh, thanks, yeah. Well, you have to say that now. Yeah. Sure. So, what would you, I know you've read the first one. Do you have a favorite character?
No.
No? Liked them all? I put in a lot of time thinking about it. Actually, once again, being an engineer, I analyzed a lot of the favorite books and movies, the characters in them, to figure out why they were beloved by so many, both kids and adults. And I pulled some of the traits out of those and then created my cast of characters. Have And do you remember Malik and Chatter? There's these two kids that are always fighting and arguing and causing trouble and getting into everyone into trouble. And I modeled those a little bit after there's a pair of robots in the Transformers series, and they're always the little robots are always arguing and fighting amongst themselves, and they actually speak in hip hop a bunch. And I used that trait with Gobin, although he doesn't speak as much of that in the second book. So anyway, those are part of how I came up with the characters. I wanted something this looks like a cat. A lot of kids think it's a cat, but it's actually a gremlin, and it's very bright, and it actually helped them solve the mystery of the cube. Gremlins are kind of, usually they're standoffish and they're mischievous and they cause a lot of trouble, but the kids had saved them from the guards, the palace guards, and so it's kind of adopted them and is helping them. And he's in the second book as well as the first.
So are all the characters from the original one in the second one, or?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a few new characters in that, and there'll be a few new in the third one. When I was writing the second book, I actually, as an incentive to get people to pre-order it from Amazon, so your ratings get bumped up a little bit at the beginning, I had a pre-order campaign, and as part of that, anyone that pre-ordered, I sent them a secret scene that nobody else had got, and I actually wrote one of the main characters from here. I don't spread it around, but it's Gobin. So I wrote a scene with him, but there's also another person in that scene that will be in the third book. So that was kind of fun. I said before that I had the dragon naming contest, so I like to do these kind of things, and I'll have to think of something to do in the third book while I'm writing that, because that's kind of fun. You get a lot of input from fans, and that's kind of fun.
Who did the cover art? They're so
Isn't he amazing? Yeah. His name is Daniel Johnson with Squared Motion, and I found him online, but when I saw his dragons and trolls and ogres, I thought, he'd be perfect. I gave him a character bio of the main characters, and then a synopsis of what the book was about, and he'd do sketches, and we'd discuss it, and it took about 2.5 months and it got better and better and better, and I think they're just stunning the way they.
So he already drew that type of dragon.
Yeah, he did quite a lot of things, but he loved the fantasy kinds of ogres and trolls and dragons and stuff. Really good. Yeah, he's amazing. And in this one, there was an old movie called Goonies that our family really liked. So I gave him the cover of that, where the kids are standing around, they're looking at pirate treasure, and there's skulls and all that. But I said, I kind of like that feel, but I want the cube, which is an important piece of the first book, in there, that the gremlin helps them solve and open. And then everything else. And the dragon is quite amazing, and he did a fabulous job of capturing that. Actually, when Tom goes through the portal in the first book, he gets captured by the trolls. And Max, his dog, runs and gets help from the elves, and Avani conjures up the image of a dragon to distract the trolls while her friends can rescue Tom. But she's getting tired at this point. She's been holding this image for a long time, and she can't do it anymore. The magic starts to fail, and the dragon starts to dissolve. It's just an image of a dragon. But as you've seen in the second book, there are real dragons. So kind of fun. But I was amazed at how he captured that. But anyway, what I was getting to is on the second one, I just gave him several of my favorite scenes, and scenes I knew the artist would love, and I let him choose. And he chose a pivotal one. It's right in a section of the book where there's a false climax, a false success, and then immediately followed by everything falling apart. And this is the scene where everything just is falling apart. There's well, it's off to this side. You can't quite see it, but there's an explosion in the background, and this crevasse opens beneath Tom and Max, and of course fall into the crevasse. So it's kind of been fun. Any other questions? Well,
Do you have ideas for book 3 already?
yeah, I've got it mapped out, most of the scenes mapped out at a high level. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I think it was before the presentation fully started, really started, that there's each book is a standalone story, and the third book will take off where at the end of just after the second book takes off, as the second one did to the first. But there's an overlapping, arching story that carries across all three and gets tied up at the end of the third book. And that's writing that is kind of tough, because that meant while I was writing the first one, I had to be thinking several books in the future. What do I need to put in here that will foreshadow things from and be used in later ones? And so there's a few things that are used out of here, and even more used out of the second book that will be in the scenes of the third book. But it's kind of fun, because I have to tie up all the loose ends, right? And so I was thinking it would be just the main characters and the main storyline. The plot needs to get pulled together in the bigger view of things. But also that now sometimes I'm walking along or jogging or something, and I'll hear the minor characters' voices, like Kieran and Chatter and Malik and some of these others, say, well, you got to solve my problems too. You got to find a conclusion from that. And I said, but you're just a secondary character. But in my book, I'm the main character. So it's a bigger task than I originally thought, but it's going to be fun. And I hope it will be out about this time next year. But who knows? I'm pretty picky. I did on the first book. It took 2.5 years. 20 full edits, a writer's group and professional editor at the end. Second group had a different writer's group that Elliot is actually a member of. He's a fabulous author in his own right. And it took 1.5 years. So I'm hoping I can do the third one in a little over a year. I've got the outline for it. So that's
I think it's
my
interesting
goal.
that they're each standalone, because I get halfway through, not halfway, I guess like a third of the way through trilogy, and then you have to wait like 3 years, then you have to go back and reread what you already did, and you're kind of waiting.
Yeah.
I like that it's kind of wrapped up, so you don't feel like
Right.
so long.
You don't, yeah, it's not like the Lord of the Rings where it hadn't finished anything really
Yeah.
at the end of each of those.
It's just a massive cliffhanger. you
Yeah.
know?
So I did obviously finish. Each one's a standalone story, but you can tell there's more. They haven't solved everything yet. The problem of the day was solved, but there's more to go. So the third one will be the big one. Although I'll put in hooks for more books if it's wildly popular. I can continue the story. And as in some other stories have done too, there are 2 older wizards that I could go back to the time when they were kids in a prequel sort of thing. And it was a much different world back then. There were lots of schools of magic and hundreds or thousands of wizards, and now it's just, at this point, there's only the 2 wizards left, and all the schools have collapsed. I'm trying to, in the first book, reopen one of, to a small extent, in Elfhaven. So, any other questions?
I kind of want to hear more about the Gremlin.
Oh, okay.
Do you like the caddish gremlin?
Yeah, the Gremlin, he wasn't caught, but the guards stumbled on him, opening the doors on the horses and letting all the king's horses out. And so the guards are chasing him all through Elfhaven. The kids are outside the citadel trying to discover the meaning, and they think they know how to get in this, but they don't know the combination. There's some complex lock, it looks like, and it appears to have colors and involved, and some pattern in the colors. And there are levers to turn, and there's buttons to press, but they've tried a bunch of things. It belongs to Avani. She's the last keeper of the light, and her father, she knows there's something in there that they need to solve this major problem and save Elfhaven. But unfortunately, her father died in the last troll out war, basically, uprising. And and so that before he could tell her how to get into this thing. So anyway, the Gremlin runs around the corner. You can hear the guards chasing him, and he looks right at the kids. And Avani gets him to go behind her and throws a cloak over him. And then they say, "Oh, he might have went that way," Avani says. And Tom is a very moral character, so he says, after they went, "You lied to them." And she said, "Well, I said he might have gone. I didn't say he did go that way." So the Gremlin looks at, Avani tells the Gremlin, even though Gremlins have never been known to speak, she tells the Gremlin they have to get into it, and it's a combination they think and don't know how. And so he takes a look at it, and he walks up to it, and he starts playing with stuff, and then suddenly he speeds way up, and he's trying all this stuff, and one of the levers clicks into position, and a light lights up. And then the others are looking, and then he does it again, and the next one goes. And then the guards come back, and he has to run off before he's done the last one. But now Tom has enough information to have figured out what the third one must be, and so he talks it to the other kids and has them solve it, basically. But so it's kind of fun. And the second book also has riddles to solve and mysteries, and that's kind of part of the fun of it. Tom has brought along a bunch of gadgets with him. Initially, he's kind of a nerdy kid. He built a first-style robot, which some high schools and middle schools compete in these days, and he hopes to someday. But initially, he doesn't believe in magic. So when the portal opens, of course, there's always a portal to a magical realm. He goes through with his dog Max, and he's trying to solve all the problems with his knowledge of science and technology and a few gadgets he happened to bring with him. And his friends are obviously trying to use magic to help him solve those problems and save Elfhaven. So kind of a fun dynamic. It's a little bit unusual. Any other questions?
That's a good Have the Elfhaven people ever seen technology? Are they in like a future where there was technology that collapsed and like magic is?
There were some things like that. There were Elliot. What was that series of books with the wizard that for the longest time it looked like they were way back in the Shannara series. Mm-hmm. They were way back in history, but later on you get little clues that no, civilization has collapsed. But on Elfhaven, people live a lot longer, but they're still back in their first period that's kind of, castles and dragons and all that stuff. So they haven't got there. So actually, the prophecy of Elfhaven goes on in the second book and brings a little bit more to light that part of why he could save Elfhaven or he could destroy it is partly the technology he brings in, and the knowledge is, way out of touch with. He has knowledge way past that medieval time that they live in, and who knows what he's going to unleash unknowingly upon them. So, but he's just a kid. It's all exciting, and Gobin loves that. He passes on plans for various things, and Gobin runs to the dwarves and they build them. So, so the third book will be fun because the second book started where this one left off, and really this was about 2 weeks period of time. This whole book passing, but the second one starts from there, and it's probably another 2 weeks. But I won't give it away on the third one. But the third one is a year will have passed before, and things will have changed a fair amount at both on Earth and in Elfhaven. It starts actually in the near future. Tom's mom is a brilliant theoretical physicist leading a team that's trying to prove the existence of parallel universes. And that research is actually going on right now. And part of this, in this kind of a genre, the middle grade storyline, they choose orphans because they don't want. It's tough if the main character has parents, because then the mom isn't going to let Johnny save the universe because he may get a hole in his new jeans, So a lot of, like Harry Potter, they just make the kid an orphan, the easiest way to do it, and a lot of them have done it. But I didn't want to do that. So he comes from a family, his father left when he was young, but his mother is a brilliant theoretical physicist. So, but when the portal opens from her lab, he goes through first, and she goes through, but there's a little time difference between the two universes, and he doesn't know she's there. And she's searching and having her own adventures, while Tom is having his adventures. And I did that because I wanted it not to be so boy-centric. So I put in two very strong female characters. Avani, as I mentioned before, is a brilliant 13-year-old elven girl, magically gifted, self-confident and competent. She can stand up to the older prince, Prince Devraj. And then Tom's mom, a brilliant physicist, very capable, and she has a hobby of wushu. She's a kung fu teacher as a hobby. So they both have their adventures, but anyway, it's a little more balanced, I thought, doing it that way. And actually, Avani is my favorite of the main characters. Any other questions?
How did you come up with all the names?
Oh, well, that's an interesting thing, too. I chose Tom because I wanted something that had that ring of Harry Potter. So I went through a ton of things, and Thomas Holland just had that feel of Harry Potter, Thomas Holland, about the same length and kind of similar names. But the other names, the elves, I chose Indian, East Indian names, and they have meaning. If you look them up, related to their characters. The characteristics of each character is similar to what the name means. And the dwarves, I chose Gaelic, Irish names for them. And then there's the trolls and ogres, and I thought, well, what culture do I want to bash? And I thought, no, I'll get in big trouble if I do that. So I just made up kind of funny names. They're often comic relief anyway. So the main troll, Bellchar. Although I misspell them so that the kids may or may not get what they're really, but if they read it phonetically, they'll understand. And in the second book, Bellchar is there as well, but there's also his sidekick is Dumber. Only it sounds like it's from French or something, Demier, but it's Dumber. So Bellchar and Dumber are the two main comic relief characters in these books. But so that's how I got the character names. Anything else?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
That was great.
Aye, Chichi Boo.